Well, thank you so much for joining in today. In this video, we are going to be talking about reading and writing various files using Java. As we know, data are everywhere, all around us, and files are the one very popular form of data. And if you were to write a program, any program really, most likely you'll end up dealing with files. Sometimes you have to read a file, sometimes you have to write a file, and there's a lot of things that goes around while reading and writing file. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about just that, how to read various files, what are the things that we need to be careful about while reading and writing this file, and also we're going to be focusing on some of the best practices that are important while reading and writing files. So let's get started. I'm very excited. In this video, I'll mostly be talking through code. That means is that I'm going to be, as you can see, there's a project file on my screen here. So I will have all of the example in the file, in the code itself, and I will be explaining code as I go and explaining the various ways of reading and writing this file. So this is going to be a Java program, like I mentioned before. So we are going to be using Java. As you see, this is Maven project. This is very simple project here. So I call it small data here. I am using Java 11, and that's a long-term support. And for the external dependencies, I have Apache Commons, Common CSV, and Google JSON. As you can guess, you can easily guess that I'm using this library to do something with CSV, and this library to do something with JSON. It says that JSON. It's a it's the name of the library, but the file type is JSON. So let's get started. I'm going to kind of go over the project here, kind of give you guys a rundown about the normal organization. As you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 packages here, right? So in here, first one, file reader. So as you guys can see, this one just focuses on reading file, and this one I have file writer, just focuses on writing file, and this one's some of the POSO object, plain old Java object that needed in order to read and write files here. It's very simple, normal. And I have another called RecordJSON that is similar to the one before, but it has a few things slightly different. So I decided to go ahead and add that here as well. And I got util, normal util for record object, and then I have the main class here. And in this main class, as you can see, I have created a simple threading here. Nothing crazy, just have a number of thread 3. So the reason for that is I know will only be going very small amount of work. And as we go down here, as you can see, tags is the list of file reader and file writer. So if you go file reader here, simply control click. This is the file reader here. And then if we go back again, one step back, and we got file writer. File writer is this one right here. So as you can guess, both file reader and file writer implements the runnable. Reason for that is we want to be able to pass them to executors and then run them concurrently. So if these classes implements runnable, they have to override run, and that's the run is the method that gets run whenever we add them to here. As you see, executor.submit, and then this task here, traversing through its tags and adding them here so that they can run parallelly. And then after we done adding them, I am checking to see if the executor is terminated. That means all of my tags is completed, or this is not running. And then if it is still running, we're just going to be like, hey, these talks are still running, and wait for 30 seconds. And finally, I am going ahead and trying to stop that executors right here. The reason for that is if we do not stop the executor, the program will keep running because as you see, this is executor service. You have to stop it. Otherwise, your program will never return or exit. So that's there pretty much. So that is normal organization of code. Let's go back to these things here. I have a folder called data. In here, you see image data. This is something I had before while I was running it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it here so that I can show you guys later. So we have JSON data and I have text data. And I'm also going to delete this output because that was something I created with file writer. in text data, if I open, you can see this is a comma separated value CSV. Every line I have ID, first name, last name, date of birth, street, city, state, and zip, and I have record. Every line is new record. Michael, Robert, Annie, Ryan, Oscar. So those are our sample data. I kind of created these on my own, random data. And then we have JSON data here. As you see, they look very alike. The reason is that they are the same file. This is just a JSON representation of this data down here. That's all, pretty much. So those are our test file. And then we have one image file because we're also going to be doing reading and writing with image file. And I'm going to be showing you guys some example of how to do that. So this is the file I have. This is very old house, very interesting and beautiful house here. We are going to be rotating this house, clockwise, probably anti-clockwise as well, but we'll get to that. Major things here is we want to see how to read these images and manipulate them if we want to. So let's get to some of the classes here. So as I mentioned earlier, there's many ways to read the file. One way to read the file is using this. We have univariate array reader. So with this, we can create a series of arrays. So as you can see, we are creating arrays, and these are all series of arrays. Here, I'm only using ID and zip because those are the only two integers I have, and this is also the limitation of univariate arrays, because it requires the data to be of same type, and which is not going to be same type most of the cases when you're dealing with real old data. And as you can see here, what we're simply doing is, there are many ways you can read this file. This one, basically reading an input file, right? It gets the input file when it's create this object, and in this read file method, it basically reads the input file. There are many ways to read this input file. You could just read the whole string, but that might cause some IO errors and all this stuff. And the best practice is to create a file reader and pass that to buffer reader and read every line as we go using buffer reader. So as you go here, line. So here we have buffer reader BR. We read the first line. We split those data with comma, and then we create a kind of printout here saying like, hey, this is basically what we're reading, because this is going to be header, I believe. And then we have this two arrays down here, and we have the line string, and then we have a line number. So as we go down here, as you can see, we are checking if the next line is not null. That means we want to make sure that we haven't reached to the end of a file. So here, again, we split it. And when we split that, we get a array of string. And then as we know, we have ID, line number. And the reason, if you look at here, we have array of size 5, it is because we have 5 record here. Again, this is also a drawbacks of reading file this way, because it requires you to know the size of your data, which very difficult to know. So that's there. And then basically here, based on, we are using integer to pass, because the return, this is a string. So we need to translate that to integer. So another thing here, always use a wrapper class when you have to parse. The reason for that is all this wrapper class comes with this handy method to parse your object from one form to the integer. For example, here we're using from string to integer. And then also this method throws an exception. And if I just hover over here, let's check it out. It probably tells us what exception it throws. Or look at that, number format exception. So it's very handy. You can catch the exception and then see if you have the data in right format or not. This is very useful. And then basically what we're doing here, we have another list. It's an array list which holds the array of integer, and we're adding those in our IDs and zip. And we're also catching any IO exception that might throws as we go, as we read and write this file. So let's see where we are calling this class. I'm simply going to control click that. If I go do that, here we go. So this is where we're calling this class. And I want to show you something else here for just a design. So all of our reader class are implementing custom file reader. So if I go to custom file reader here, it's an interface, and anything that implements this interface, it will force you to override this and implement this read file class, a read file method, I'm sorry. And that read file method also returns a list of any class. So if we look at that, basically what are the classes that are implementing custom file reader? We have univariate array class that implementing custom file reader, and sure does, it is overriding and implementing that read file method. Similarly, we have multivariate array also doing the same thing, basically implementing custom file reader, and here it is also overriding that read file method. Another we have is, as you guys can see, JSON to class object reader. It is also doing the same thing, implementing custom file reader and overriding the read file. And as we see here, another is that image file reader. Let's see what it's doing. Same thing. So the reason for we're doing this is so that we can add all of this class is a normal custom file reader class, and this is our entry point to all the file reader. As you see, this is overriding run because we're passing this to executor service. Here we have a data folder. This is simply where my data lives. CSV file here, JSON file here, image file here. And as we see here, I'm creating a CSV file, JSON file, image file simply by using their path and then separating them with a file separator. This is operating system independent, so I highly recommend to use this rather than using a / or \. And then here, custom file reader, univariate, this is basically initializing each of these class, CSV, JSON to class object, image file reader, and then basically it's adding them in the list, and at the end it will basically calling those read file method on these classes. And as you can see, we're also printing them. This is basically for debugging purpose. We want to see what these classes are doing. This is very handy and helps us to debug through any problem we might have while implementing this. So we already finished up kind of going over univariate. So a couple of things to remember is always use buffer reader with file reader because we only want to keep the lines that we care about in our application, not just try to read gig of file at once. And this will help us to avoid IO exception. And we have so a couple drawbacks to that univariate array approach is that it will require us to know the size of our data, and then it will only be useful in the data that are of same type. So it is not a good approach. Don't use this. I'm just showing them as a demonstration. Do not use it. We'll talk about a better approach here in a minute. So next one is multivariate. It is very similar to univariate. Only different here is that we are adding, as you can see, we are adding each record in one array. So here, first record has, you see that ID, and second record has a zip code, and then we're adding them in record list. Again, it also suffers the same drawbacks of univariate array approach, so do not use it. This is just for a demonstration approach. And next way to read a file, we have JSON to class object. This is highly recommended way, and the reason for that is this is very flexible, and you can apply object-oriented principle to this one. So this is the recommended way to read file if your file has the data that are and can be represented to any class or object. So let's look into this one here. So basically, what we are doing again using buffer reader, and as you see here, we are not just reading a string or anything like that. What we're doing is we're initializing the JSON, and at the beginning of the video I talk about that this library here. This is the library that created by Google. This is a very good library. You can write your own JSON parser very easily, but the problem is sometimes there will be a double quote or single quote attached inside your JSON object, and then in order to target those, you might have to do some crazy regex. So let's not worry about that. Well, if there's a library already out there that are well tested, well built, the recommended way to go ahead and use it. So this library is very good. So basically what I'm doing here is grabbing the first line, as you see, grabbing the first line, and here this is a JSON file. Where it's coming from is that if I do control click this guy here JSON file, right? We're passing JSON file here. So back to that. So basically every JSON file, we're reading every line from JSON file, and then we're just calling this JSON from JSON method, and then we're passing our class here, RecordJSON. So basically what RecordJSON is, it's a POJO class. Like I said, it has a ID string, ID long, name string, date of birth as a date, and then we have this address here. Has setter and getter, and also has this toString to print it out so that we can see that in the screen. And if we go back here again, so basically what it does, it will get the first line. In our case here, it is going to be this JSON data. It gets this first line, and it will try to parse it and initialize this object called RecordJSON. If it is successful, it is going to return the record. And then basically what we're doing is this record list is an array list of the RecordJSON object. We're going to add them. If anything happens, this line is not parsable, and there's something error, syntactical error, and any kind of error with that, then it will throw this JSON syntax exception, which you're catching it here. I'm just printing here, but it might be different in your case. You might want to report to it. You might want to log to database or whatever you need to do. This could be a catastrophic error for you. You might want to, if you're reading a file from the client, you might want to let the client know that the file they're sending us are not in a correct JSON format, or like I said, it could be many things. And then at the end, this here exception is for this try. And also, if you guys see, this is try with resources, just because I'm using Java 11, so this is a recommended way to go. And at the end, it is sending the record list back. So you remember this read file is supposed to send a list, return the list of any class. If you control click that, see list of any class. So that's what we're doing. Basically, we are sending the list of RecordJSON. So that's how you read a JSON file into a class object. Once you have this class object and a list of class objects, you can do whatever is that you require to do to analyze this this file, basically. Now we kind of go from top to bottom. Next thing I want to look at is CSV to class object reader. So this one is slightly different. Again, here we are also going to use using the Apache library, very popular, well tested to read CSV file. So again, if you see, it is overriding the read file method from our interface called custom file reader. And further down here, we have buffer reader, basically reading each line. This is here, we know our first line is header. And if we go back in here, look at the file, not that one, this one, we can't really pass this file. This is just the header information. So I'm ignoring that. If you want to, you might have different requirement. You might have to log it or do something with it. You can totally do that. But for this simple demonstration, I am basically ignoring that by read line. And then whenever I read next line, it would be an actual line here. And then here, I'm talking about actual data, right? Not just a header here. So this CSV parser, again, it's coming from this library down here called Apache Commons CSV. And then what we can do with this library is basically call this parse method in our CSV parser. This is static methods. We can just call it, and then that it will take a string and format. It has a many format, really. Like I said, it has many format. You can look it up, but here we're just using a default. And then what it would do, it will return this parser. So, and then in that parser is basically a iterator of CSV record. So we can pass into this enhanced for loop here. And then once we get to that, basically, since we were not using JSON, here we have the responsibility of parsing all of these record on our own. If you go back, look at this JSON one, it's out of the box, comes RecordJSONs, but that is not the case here for CSV. So we're getting CSV record and we need to parse that on our own. So here I'm creating this util class, RecordUtil. The reason for that, one question that I would like to address here is that why not create this util method in this object in here? Why create a separate RecordUtil? The reason for that is we want to keep this record object as lean and as lightweight as possible, because if we have a big data, what happens is we're going to add up this record object, and then the number of record objects is going to be so huge that we do want to keep those lean, so that in scenario like we're dealing with big data, we don't go ahead and eat up all the storage or memory here. So basically, keeping it separate makes it easy to work with, and also it's a good practice here. So back to this CSV object class reader here. Again, what we're trying to do here is we're using RecordUtil and parse long. So if we go back to RecordUtil has so many. I'm going to expand this a little bit. So many statics method. So it has this parse long. It just basically takes the string, parse it out. If anything were to go wrong, it will just return null here. Otherwise, it will return the long value, long representation of that. We also have parse date. So in parse date here, we are given string date and then a format, simple date format. If you're not familiar with that, it's very popular to parse the date. So you might want to look into this. This is very handy class. So, and basically we're trying to parse it and then return that date. If we're not successful to do that, it's simply going to return null. Same thing here, but in this time we're using, as you can see, we're using offset date time. The difference is offset date times comes with time zone and all that. So if you have the data that has time zone, it is very useful. For example, if we go back to our data here, I purposely put no time zone on JSON data, and then in here we have the data with time zone. So in this case, offset date time is perfect for us. So let's go back to RecordUtil again. So parse date, and also we have a boolean is valid. So if you look at this, is valid here. It's using a lot of static field here, min long inclusive, min long value. So what basically it's doing is it's trying to see if the data we're getting is in the range of acceptable values. So for example, if we're expecting data from 0 to 100 and we're getting data 101, then it is invalid data. We call it outliers. So this is just catching those outliers as we ingest this data. Same thing here, it's city valid. It has this list of invalid cities, and it was checking to see if the cities that is provided is in that invalid cities. If it is, then it is not a valid data. Here is not a valid city. Same thing here is date of birth valid. So if we have, for any reason, we are looking maybe data that are, for example, here date of birth from 2000 to, I don't know, 2010. In that case, we can check this here. So this date of birth, it is again offset date time. Is it after our minimum date time and before our max date of birth? So that's pretty much the RecordUtil class. If I go up here, I'll show you here. We have also one thing I wanted to mention here. I almost forgot. This null values here. There's many ways null values are presented in the file, especially in data files. Sometimes people write null, NA, empty, all of that. And also, we want to cast this because we want to know what are the files that we truly care about, what are the files we don't. So if you look at here, is null static method here. It's not being used, but it's very important that important to identify this. So that's the reason I kept it here. So basically, if you could look at the null values, it just basically check-ins. It contains two uppercase to kind of make this comparison similar. And then we're trimming if there's any spaces provided. This is going to take care of that. And then this way we can check if the value is null. You might have to extend this list based on your data, because you might have some other way to represent data. And one way to find out is that you can scan your data with your eyes for first few record, or you can also write a small program to take 5 records from the top, 5 records from the bottom, and then in random records and kind of analyze that. If you're dealing with very big data, most of the time there will be data dictionary. Data dictionary is just information about your data, and that would be provided. If not, you can create your own by just simply randomly picking few records and analyzing them, and then passing them through some sort of validation test here. You know, if the date valid, if it's null, if it's blank, and then only targeting the data that you care about, or or valid, or reaching out to people who provided you data to ask them to give you better data. I don't know. Could be anything here. As you see, invalid cities, I only kept Norman here. This is simply for testing purpose. And I have a mean date of birth, max date of birth, mean long inclusive, mean long, max long inclusive, max long value, mean long value. Pretty much, this will validate our data and also helps us translate this type from a string to any required type. So let's go back to this class object here again. So basically, for the ID, we want the long, first name, last name. It's okay with the string here. Date of birth, we want to pass that. I also offset date time because that's what we have in our string data. Street, city, state, zip, we want to parse that again to long. Here, this is just an example that I have. What I'm doing here is I have the data. Maybe I have a requirement that I can only return a valid list. So that's why I checked if the date of birth is not null. If there's any parse error, we know it's going to return null. And then I'm also checking if it is valid date of birth. And that means it's a before and after. That means the range that we are honoring here. And CD valid, if it's Norman, it's not valid. As we know, we looked at the class earlier. And then here, basically, I'm creating a builder object, record builder. So what record builder is, it's actually inside the record. So it's a class that is responsible for creating a record object. So this is builder class. I'm passing first name, last name, and it has a basically you can set its type, sets it's a variable, like the properties as we go, ID here, date of birth here, and all that. And at the end, the main thing is this: when you run build, it is going to call return new record. So this basically is going to create a new record. So if you go up here, it takes the record builder and just basically steals these properties from the record builder and applies to this one here, and then just kind of create our record object. So let's go back to here. See, we call the build here, create a record object, add them in the list, and returns that. So that's pretty much it. So that's how we read CSV to class object reader here. And this is with this one, we're reading CSV file. And the last one we have here is image file reader. Since the video is already kind of too long, went way over time, I'm going to just go over image file reader, and then I'll probably create a new video to go over writing files. I was planning to kind of put that in the same video, but I do also wanted to explain every single things in my program. So let's jump into image file reader, and then we'll wrap up this video, and then all the file writing will be in the next video. So let's get to that image file reader. So image file reader here, again, we can see where this class is initialized, and that is right here. Not there, here actually. So in the image file reader, we're basically giving image file, and then if you look at what image file is, this is our image file right here. So if we go back to image file reader, here we are basically using buffer image, and again, this is also implementing that read file method here, because we have implements custom file reader interface, and that forces us to override this right here. And this will return the list of grayscale we have in this image. So basically, image file image IO has this static method called read, and it takes the file. This is your image file, and basically with image buffer image here, you have this get height and get width method that you can basically use. And here I'm just creating that two-dimensional array with width and height. And this is a for loop inside for loop. Basically, we are going through every pixel in the image, and then just basically reading that RGB value. So if you look at here, image, again, this is buffer image, get RGB for I location and J location, and will give us IRGB. And I'm setting that RGB here on the data two-dimensional array. Basically for I, for J, this is RGB. And this is something I have done here. Basically what we're doing is we're translating that to RGB components here. So blue, green, red with this shift. And then now basically we're adding that. If you go back here, we are also have this grayscale method. This is just a method. This basically gives you a grayscale representation based on the red, green, and blue. So if we go back again, simply, so we get the double from there, we're adding them in, and at the end we're returning it back. So that's pretty much reading a file here. Some of the things I really wanted to talk about, there's many other ways to read a file. People talk, there's a matrices, vectors, we'll get to that later. But for now, these are very important. Some of the stuff I kind of want to repeat here is always look for nulls, blank space, any parse error, outliers, things like that, and then know how to always use a wrapper class to parse from a string to anything you really wanted, and look out for those parsing error, very important. And then while reading a file, also make sure you use buffer reader. Don't try to read the whole file in a string because that might slow your application down. And and basically, like I said, there are many kinds of file here. We only went over CSV and JSON, and mostly use library because that's what you will see these days. Everybody will basically use library there. And there are other type of file. There's a constant width, a delimited file. It could be not just comma. It could be really anything delimited. I mean, pipe delimited and whatever. But you get an idea. Like I said, there's an image file, and all that. So, all right, that's pretty much all. But I'm going to show you guys a quick rundown by running this program here. So basically, I'm going to go up here. Here, for the simplicity, I'm going to remove the writer because we haven't got to cover that here. So I have this IntelliJ run configuration. I'm just going to run it. And as you see on my, here, give it a minute, it's building it. Here we go. So I'm going to expand this a little bit so that you can see. Ooh, it's reading all of those grayscale, that double we had. It's printing them out. That's a lot of this, really. But like I said, this project is also going to be on GitHub when I'm done with the tutorial. Like I said, there are going to be a few more videos down the line. Once I'm done with it, I am going to create a public repository and put this out there so that you can also look at it. Currently, it's not out there, but I'm going to do that here in this or next couple videos. So basically, this basically ran here. The reason you can't see any other output here because they got there were a lot of output. I think my IntelliJ just kept the most recent one. But let me do that something here real quick. File reader app. If I just comment that out, the image one, we'll be able to see other reader here pretty quick. Beautiful. So as you see, I'll kind of start here. Reading file using univalid array reader class. It read those files and then put them on an array list. I ran two string to array, so it looks like this. It's not really helpful, but it will be helpful when we're using a record object. So here using a multivariate array again, you'll see this. But here now we're using CSV to class object reader. So our class object reader looks like we only have one record that is valid. Obviously this what is that? Norman's one's not going to be valid because Norman is our invalid city list. And here we're using JSON to class object. That we didn't really do much validation, so all of our stuffs came back as a valid. But one thing I do want to point out is that you see that the object looks date object looks different. It's just because when we print it, that's how it's printing it here, and then we shut it down, basically executor service. Okay, that's all for this video. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Like I said, we're going to be creating a next video to talk about file writing and what are the things that needs to watch out for while doing that. So I will see you guys in that video. Until then, stay happy. See you guys later.